Rolling.
Okay, I really enjoyed talking to Cal State Northridge and the class there. And I thank the class and I thank Perry Clem. And I was presented with a bunch of questions which you all didn't get a chance to ask. So I'm going to go through some of these and answer your questions now. And if this doesn't work, send me an email. I could follow up with you. How do art dealers find their value worth of an art piece after it is appraised? What kinds of appraisal items are usually sought off the most? Well, let me answer the last part of that first. It really depends on the area. In my particular area of African, pre-Columbian, South Pacific, and American Indian, there are a number of objects that are more sought after another, and it really goes from area to area. So without a specific area, it would take me a long time to answer that question. The first one, how do art dealers find the value worth of an art piece? Well, after it's appraised, we already know what the value is, so that process of appraising something consists of authenticating it, doing the research, finding comparables in the auction database, and working with dealers and curators and that sort of thing. And so it's a process of lots and lots of research to get the appraised value. Okay, could you expand on your experience at Tulane University? What made you decide to leave? Well, I left halfway through my second semester, and I took all W's, and the reason why I left was because I was screwing around and I wasn't serious, and I didn't really have much of a choice. Not exactly what I would recommend for you all, but that's what happened. Tulane University was fantastic. The beginning part of my career, when I was there as a freshman, I did not distinguish myself, but after I managed to get back into the university, which was at the height of Vietnam. I went back, I applied myself, I actually got a Navy scholarship and paid for my education and wound up subsequently going into the Navy. Since antiques have placed a huge role in your life, what would you say perhaps in the future would be antiques? For example, our objects today, what could be considered an antique, say 100 years from now? It's really a great question. And that's signed Josefina. What happens is the perception of what is important does constantly change, and what we consider now to be valuable was really not much. For example, when I was a boy, Roy Rogers and Howdy Doody lunch boxes were, I mean, all the kids had them and it wasn't a big deal. And now they're extremely expensive. So it really depends on time and how you perceive it. And if I could tell you how to do that, then I would probably already be on an island in the South Pacific and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay, the next one. If you could change anything about your years in school, what would it be? I actually have two regrets. One, it would have been a good idea if I'd been a little bit more serious and focused less on beer and girls and having a good time. And if I'd focused a little bit more on my studies, it would have been great. I always regretted that I never had a chance to take computer science at Tulane. At that time, which was 1963 to 68, it was in its infancy, and it really wasn't something that's offered nowadays. But I've always been fascinated with that, and I would have liked to have done it. Okay, but because digital art can be duplicated, does that make it harder to auction off and set a price? How would digital art be sold? Well, those are great questions with obvious legal implications on copyright and that sort of thing. And it's really not my field, and so I can't really answer that, but it's a great question, and I I would try to research that on the internet, because there's just tons of information out there on digital art and selling digital art. What was the weirdest thing you sold at the Antiques Roadshow? Well, we don't sell things, we just appraise things at the Roadshow. And I think the strangest thing was the one I told you about in the lecture, which was the shrunken head. And that was certainly fun to do. I wish you all had seen it. I wish we could have taped it, but PBS would have never let me get away with that one. Have you ever met the Pawn Star guys? No, I haven't. And I want to tell you that Antiques Roadshow is legit, which means that people come in, they show us their objects, we've never seen them before, and we do the appraisal. And if you look at Storage Wars or Pawn Stars or all of those, there's no way that financially they could do what they purport to do on television. So in my judgment, it's a setup, and it's entertaining, but it's not truthful. Our current graphic design work, posters, logos, business card, collectible? If so, what makes them collectible? Well, that's another great question. What makes these things collectible is their association with people that would make them important. For example, if you had the first logo designed for Microsoft, that would be extremely collectible and certainly something that would bring a high price. So it would really depend on the association, and as a collectible, what makes it important within the context of culture. Okay, Jennifer Oya, what is the best way to get a career myself into the art world, specifically for art history? Well, one of the things that I tell people, and I think it's really important for people at your age, is to go out there and, number one, have a great attitude, be inquisitive, and just keep your eyes and your ears open and for opportunities. And try as much as you can, expose yourself to as much as you can, and don't sell out. Wait for that one thing that all of a sudden hits you that's your passion. And that's what you should do. And you know, I've often said, people have asked me, they said, okay, you're getting a little older, what's the secret of life? The secret of life is freedom. And what is your price for freedom? For some people, it might be $25,000 a year, and they may be a forest ranger somewhere. Somebody else, it may be $1 million a year, and they want to be on Wall Street. But it's a question of, you know, you're going to be around for a while, and you got a long life. What's going to be best for you? That's what you should do. And anyway, I've been very lucky in doing what I'm doing. Okay, Brielle Oakley, which careers in the arts are the hottest right now? Which career have the highest salaries? Okay, other good questions. Unfortunately, the things that a lot of us like to do the most don't bring a lot of money. And specifically, curators until later in their careers don't make a lot of money. Teachers, researchers, those sorts of things don't bring a lot of money. The things in the arts that financially are the most rewarding are things where you're in the commercial side of it. And it's a real tough, nasty business. And there's a lot of people that I started with that are no longer in business. And so it's very hard to get into. For example, we just put an ad in for a gallery assistant here in Dallas, and we had 258 people look at the ad. 71 people applied in 12 hours. So it's tough to get into, but if you want to make money, you're going to be in the commercial side of things. Do you watch Pawn Stars? Yes, when I have nothing better to do. Okay. does sociology major at all related to art? Well, that's a pretty good question. I think that sociology, which gives you a perspective on people and how people do various things, and so much of our art today really comments on life and is inspired by life. So maybe there'd be some academics that would disagree with me, but I think sociology gives you a perspective, and I think a lot of artists that are impacted by their environment and the times would probably agree with me. Okay, we're cooking here. How do you feel about graffiti or street art showing at MoCA? Integration into the art world, is it something that will fade or is it here to stay? Okay, I think graffiti art is fantastic, and quite frankly, I've followed Banksy and some of those artists. I think it's fascinating. Again, it's sort of like being an artist that creates performance art. It's not something that in that kind of format on the side of a building or something is easily sold, but as an art form and a form of expression, I think it's fascinating. And fortunately, in the age that we're in, which is so great now digitally, that stuff will live on, and it'll be there for all of us to enjoy in the future. So no, I don't think it's going to fade. There is a new genre emerging called fine art illustration, where in the past there was a sharp divide between fine art and illustration. Do you see this line truly blurring? Or is it a career as a fine art illustrator still looking down upon? Is this a lucrative career? And that is from Adrienne. Okay, think back on Frank Stella. Frank Stella was an illustrator, and he certainly has had a great career. So I think that the idea of, is illustration as an art form something that is a dead end? No, I think quite frankly it's the opposite. It's almost, it can quite often be a beginning. So if you're talking about just pure illustrations made for commercial use, would they have value? I think it really depends on the context. But no, I think if you look through art history, illustrators in the past have been, some of them have been very successful. How would I go about trying different jobs and careers without investing too many years in each? Well, if you live to 1,000, you'd be in great shape. But all right, this is the great question. I think that the best thing I can tell you is if you get out there and you try something and you work at it and it's not for you, there's going to be a voice inside you that's going to say, this is not for me. On the other hand, you might do something where you walk in, let's say you walk into an art gallery like this and you look at this art and you have no background, and all of a sudden you say, boy, researching this is really fascinating, I love this. That's how you discover what your passion is. And this idea that you don't sweat the small stuff, some of the smallest decisions that you make can guide you to a career that would have great, ultimately be what you're doing. Okay, what was your inspiration to become an art appraiser? And this is from Luis, Lewis, L-U-I-S, and he gave me a drawing of a cat. Here's the deal on this. I think, for me, art appraising gave me an opportunity to spend time with the art, and I love to research. Now this is from somebody that, as you know during the lecture, what I told you is I had 2 weeks of art history which I dropped because I thought it was boring. I wasn't ready to receive at that point in my life. But then later on, when I was exposed and I just really enjoy researching, so much of what I do in authentication is like CSI. I love to do this kind of research and to be with the art, and it was definitely my passion. Where is a good city to start out looking for an internship or assisting job in lifestyle or fashion photography? Well, that's really a tough question because I think so much depends on how useful you can be to a prospective employer. You're going to be more useful if you have more information. Therefore, if you have like a master's in photography or you have on-camera experience, in the business, if it's something where you've worked with a photographer, maybe you're a photo intern, that sort of thing. Once you have that experience and you're around people that are in the field that you want to be, they could probably help you. But generally speaking, the large cities are where you're going to want to be. The tough thing is that in large cities, there's going to be a higher cost of living, but there's going to be more jobs. But that's about all I can tell you on that. Going into the industry as a photographer in the next 5 years, granted that I started doing well for myself, and would be, what would be a realistic salary, also what area blooming in the photo industry, and that's from Baker. Okay, Baker, here's the deal. It's pretty much the last answer that I gave. I think it depends. It depends on, number one, if you have that experience. The business has changed a lot for photographers. Back in the 70s, when I was just starting my business, I knew a lot of photographers, and they were making tons of money shooting product, that's objects. They were also shooting people, models, that sort of thing. They were doing corporate work. There was a real need. Now a lot of that stuff is done with stock photographs. And so they were sort of put out of business. And so in that sense, the photography field has sort of shrunk on the commercial side. It really depends on what you want. And as far as the salary goes, I mean, there is such a wide range of salaries depending on what you're doing. I mean, you have some photographers like Leibowitz, and some of those people are making an enormous amount of money, and some are just struggling. So unfortunately, there's not really an answer to that. Okay, I'm going to slaughter this name. It looks like Chelsea or Chisa Rosby. I apologize for slaughtering your name. What state or city are illustrators most needed and wanted? Being an illustrator doesn't make enough money to be only on a job, or should you have another? Okay, this is sort of what I've answered before. Basically, I think if you can afford it, if you can survive, it would be really critical for you to be an intern, get that on your resume, get that experience, and be able to have that on the resume before you go in. And again, as far as where is it going to be the best, the big cities are going to be the best for you. And again, the cost of living is going to be expensive. Okay, Johnny Jones, what are the possibilities of being a traveling artist, particularly in the drawing and painting field? The desire to travel as part of a career is highly discouraged, especially for artists. Are there new employment opportunities opening up? You know, this is pretty much going to be a self-employment thing. I can't think of anything that I've ever heard of in a 40-year career where an artist was paid to go travel and paint and do that sort of thing. You may talk to some artists or some fine art people, maybe they'll tell you something differently. I've never heard of that, and unfortunately I think it's a pipe dream. It sounds wonderful. I'd love to be able to just travel the country and photograph and write about my experiences, but well, my wife wouldn't like that either. Are internships really necessary to get a job and career? Thanks, smiley face. I think internships are fabulous. If you can go in, and I also have really strong feelings about this. I hate free internships because if you have somebody that's motivated and they really want to learn and they want to make a contribution, I want them in my gallery. and I'll pay them. And we pay $10 an hour for an internship, and we teach that person a lot, but I also require that they make a contribution. I'm a graphic designer in my last year at CSUN. If I wanted to give animation a try and possibly get a job in it, how would I go about this? Again, it goes back to what we've said before. I think it's really critical that you go see people that are already working in that segment of the workforce and say, hey, I want to be an intern for you. And if they'll pay you, great. If they won't pay you and you can get in the foot in the door by saying, hey, I'll work for nothing once a week or whatever, do it. Do you know the identity of Banksy? And that was from Jason Phillips. Jason, I don't have a clue, but if you find out, I want you to email me. What is the rarest art piece in your collection? Also from Jason Phillips. Jason, I wouldn't begin to be able to answer that right now. I do African, pre-Columbian, South Pacific, and American Indian, and it would be like saying, what is your favorite child, even though I don't have children. So I can't do justice to that one. Alex Garcia, there are many issues with the classification of art, i.e. what is art? This being said, how would you qualify graffiti, be it in a gallery or street setting? Do you think it might ever be on the Antiques Roadshow? Yes, I think it could be on the Antiques Roadshow, and as I said before, I think graffiti is fabulous. I love it. And I think it's an important art medium and expression thereof. Okay, Lucas Esposito, I'm a photojournalist major and really into art photography. What are my possibilities having a degree in journalism? Okay, again, Lucas, I think you've got to identify the people that are doing what you want to do, and I think you need to latch on to them and say, hey, I want to work with you, and if you have to work for free, and get that under your belt, see what they do, and just have a great attitude, make yourself indispensable. And I don't care whether that's running and getting coffee or whatever you have to do it, because in the long run, it's a lot better than sitting on your rear end and waiting for something to happen. Positive and negatives of working in a design studio versus an entertainment company. CBS, I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue about this one. I've never, I greatly apologize. It's so far out of my area, and I've been told to stay in my own lane. How do you view artists using elements of other cultures in their own art? Is it culturally appropriation, or is it a respectful language to the culture they admire? And that is from Rebecca. I think that's a fabulous question. And no, I think it's, it's like saying, do you think that any art path that somebody takes is just, it's not art? I think that's a very complex question, and it goes back to, you remember the big hoo-ha at Brooklyn about having the cross in the urine. Now, that wasn't for me, and I didn't particularly like it, but I can't say that that isn't art. You have the Rauschenberg using an eagle in one of his paintings. I think you also had, I can't think of the artist's name, but you have a lot of people that are incorporating different things, and there are so many different ways that you can define art. Art really, for some people, is if a lot of people buy it, it's art. Well, I think a lot of people buy crappy art, so is that a definition? For me, it might not be. I think it's a very complex question, and I think when you have somebody that starts pontificating of what is art and what is not art, I think you should walk away from that one. What made you interested in what you do? Okay, well, I answered this a little bit in the lecture, but basically I found myself in the Middle East, and I was exposed to all these amazing cultures, and I had a chance to travel all over the place on the U.S. government's dime when I was in the Navy. I loved the cultures. I became engrossed with the objects, and it's something that I loved, and I knew then that is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And I mean, it was almost a religious experience to have this aha moment and say, wow, this is really what I want to do. But that's what it was for me, and it was great, and I hope you have the same. Thomas, do you work with shamanistic art? If so, must you get approval from the shaman before displaying or working with their pieces? Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, most of the shamans I deal with are dead. And that's my favorite kind because nobody asks me any questions. To be a little more serious about that, I take animism and shamanism, I take that very seriously. I'm very respectful of these different cultural approaches to how you deal with life. And if I were in something that were more of a contemporary setting, I would most certainly be concerned with that, and I think it's a great question. What is the best way to go about, this is from April, what is the best way to go about freelancing in the animation industry? Again, same question, or similar question. I think you need to get with the people that do this for a living and work for them and find out what's going on. How do you see the future of graphic design? And that's from Erica. I think that's a great question, and we really don't know what the impact of computers are going to be on the future. I mean, for example, and if you spread this around, someone's going to come lock me up, so don't tell anyone about this. But I see a person having a holographic art collection. And let's say they're going to have a museum group that will come by. And they'll immediately have these holographic images that would be appealing to those people that would come over. Maybe they're going to have a family Christmas party. Those images will come down and something else will go up. And you may not actually ever own art in the future, but you might have this wonderful representation of things that you love to see. Who knows what the future is, but I think it's going to be exciting. And if I'm not here to know about it, I want someone to try to send me a message or something. Okay, Abner Jimenez, what's the most impressive piece of Dogon art you've come across? Well, another great question. I would say that you should go to the Metropolitan Museum or Quai Branly in Paris, or there's also in the Louvre, there is a special section that has some extraordinary Dogon pieces. But those three institutions, I think, have extraordinary Dogon pieces and really great. Can you explain a bit about becoming a curator? Well, that's another tough question. I think that with a curator, the curators that make the most money, and I think Perry will tell you this, are the ones that have a PhD. And if you have a PhD and you can go into a museum system, as you go along in the museum system, you'll ultimately have that choice of whether you want to go into being a museum administrator or whether you want to stay in the curatorial field. And as you proceed through bigger and bigger institutions with more and more responsibility, you're going to make more money and you're going to become more successful. You want to have had a lot of different experiences. You want to have a great attitude where you're willing to do anything, anytime, anywhere, that sort of thing. and you want to be inquisitive, you want to be fun to be around, and excited about the unbelievable future you got ahead of you. So I've really enjoyed talking to your group, and if you have more questions, just shoot me an email and I'll try to answer it. And good luck to all of you, and again, Perry, thank you.